Have Hurricane Erin as expected, so we are going to continue to track this hurricane. Of course, we have Robert Speta from our sister station over in Jacksonville, First Coast News, and from Columbia, South Carolina, Daniel Bonds. How you guys doing this morning? Excited to have a hurricane?
Yeah, I mean, my goodness. We were watching the hurricane hunters fly around it this morning, and I kept looking at it going, all right, which one of these passes are we going to get that confirmation that this is upgraded? But, we did anticipate it, right? Actually, a little bit later than I think we were originally anticipating. So this shouldn't be much of a surprise out here in the Atlantic. What do you think here, Daniel?
I think we might be having some technical difficulties there with that one. 75-mile-per-hour winds, though. And it's funny, that's what you were talking about, Robert. I was watching, and I think the first run that I was looking at this morning is in the 5 o'clock hour, and they were reporting only 65-mile-per-hour winds. Yeah, we're expecting this thing to be a hurricane early this morning because when I went to bed last night, it was 70-mile-per-hour winds. The central pressure was at 997, but the central pressure went up a little bit. And the good news is it started that turn. Yesterday, it was on a more western track. It went west-northwest as we went throughout the overnight. So, yeah, everyone coming in early this morning expecting this to be a hurricane, but looking pretty good. Daniel, what are you seeing over there in South Carolina?
So I can hear you now. It's a good thing to be able to hear. So, yeah, we're continuing to track what is now Hurricane Erin, which is a little bit behind schedule. We talked about this earlier, that on average we would expect our first hurricane to be on August the 11th. But it does look like we'll have our first major hurricane a little bit ahead of schedule, which is typically around September 1st. It really doesn't change what we're looking at. We're still watching the potential for some deadly rip currents, looks like some beach erosion, and some probably larger than normal wave action for our coastline. And that's about it for us. No real changes in our thought process. The weather next week looks like it's going to be actually pretty nice for us here across the Carolinas, although we're still monitoring this closely just in case it maybe skirts parts of the Outer Banks. But I tell you what, all indications are right now looking pretty good for us in the Carolinas.
No, Robert, that's actually fantastic news, because one of the things I was looking at this morning in South Carolina, you're setting some rainfall records. I saw some spots the wettest summer on record so far, and we're not done with summer yet. And this is good news because with this system, we're not looking at a lot of rain with that. But yeah, as you mentioned, could be the first or earlier than normal major hurricane, expected to become a Category 3 storm as we go throughout your Saturday. And Category 4, some of the earlier models showing this as well. This one now by Sunday, where the other models were showing into Monday, and actually strengthening up even more by Monday morning. 140-mile-per-hour winds as we go throughout early on Monday. So here's the good news again. We've been showing you the forecast model. The consensus has been pretty much following this track. I'm going to show you some of the history of the cones and the actual track coming up here in just a minute, because it's pretty much fallen within that. Now, this just goes to show how strong that big ridge of high pressure to the north is, because it's been keeping that push down to the south. So every time they put out a cone, you've got to, when you get a 3-hour, 6-hour update, it's not making that turn just yet, but it started over the weekend, which is good. And then as it continues to make that turn Tuesday, still a Category 4, and then back to a Category 3 early Wednesday morning, which, of course, is still a dangerous hurricane. But you see there that little speck above the Wednesday 8 a.m. 125, that is Bermuda. So we're going to show you some of the forecast models here coming up, because, again, forecast models are in still relatively good agreement. Robert, have you seen any big changes coming? Of course, you see the spaghetti models there, so you still see that spread.
I think the biggest change I have seen, it started last night, and there was a specific reason, I believe, is why we've seen a change. The hurricane hunters started flying through this and getting that good initialization data. So you can see right there, it looks like the ensembles and even the multi-models, it's becoming a lot tighter, not only in the next 3 to 4 days, but the long-range projection, the next 5 to 7 days, it's become a lot tighter together, which I think is just that confidence built off of that initialization data. Just numerical models 101. Basically, if you don't understand it, the most important thing with these models, especially when they're in the middle of the Atlantic, they don't have on-the-ground sites. You don't have balloon launches out there. So we're just using satellite data at first. But once those hurricane hunters go through, and especially the P3s, the NOAA hurricane hunters, they have a Doppler radar on board, the tail Doppler radar. That just provides such good and valuable information. So I have noticed that, and even yesterday, remember we were talking about, we were talking to Daniel here, and we were saying some of those ensembles were kind of hitting the Carolinas, right? Well, now the general consensus is coming together, so definitely an improvement in confidence, and this is why those hurricane hunters are just so important out there, right?
Yeah, they've got the recon mission. As you can see here, they're flying through it. It looks like they're back in it again, and they're going to continue to do this. And it's always nice to watch that because they're actually sending back real-time data on this. And you're right. So when you initialize your forecast models with the real-time data, it's just like the difference, like you said, when we have storms that come through the town to Jacksonville, to Tampa, and up towards Columbia, the Doppler radar is a lot more accurate than satellite data is. And of course, up until the hurricane hunters go in, we're relying on that satellite data, maybe some buoy data to see, the winds and stuff like that. But now with the hurricane hunters in there, we're going to get a lot more accurate data, and that of course means a lot more accurate of a forecast, which again is good news. Speaking of accuracy and forecasts, one of the reasons why, and it's funny, you mentioned this, Robert, look at the cone history of this. So where the cone originally was and the actual path. So you can see up here where the previous forecast is, and you can see where the cones have been, and you can still see it's on the southern edge of where these four previous cones were. And of course, you see it keep shifting it to the south. You see that actual path. You see that little jog down to the south. And again, this is what we're talking about, that big ridge of high pressure, which is why, again, you in Jacksonville, Robert, and you, Daniel, as well, been watching this very closely because it's that push down to the south that makes it travel further to the west when it makes that turn.
And I think that
certainly
probably the people that are most concerned about that southern jog is less of us on the East Coast and our friends in the Leeward Islands, the British and Virgin Islands out there. I mean, they're under a tropical storm watch now, right? And I wouldn't be surprised if that extends maybe out to northern areas of Puerto Rico. But Daniel, I want to hear your thoughts on, that westward jog. I mean, we have that confidence this is going to stay offshore, but what are you thinking about the fact that it is kind of edging further off there towards the west?
I think that's always a concern, especially when you got these storms towards our south and you look at some of the historic paths of those same storms. And I think we mentioned Hugo earlier. That's really the litmus test for South Carolina. But whenever it starts to jog a little bit more towards the right of the path, or at least the south of the path, it definitely makes you look a little bit closer at it. And so what we have to remind everyone is it still hasn't made that turn towards the north yet. But it looks like, at least indications are, that it will. And I think, Robert, you made a great point about the real data that we're getting now, and that should help the forecast. And it's so important to get that real data into the models and add that into everything that we are looking at, and it gives you a better idea of a better way to forecast this thing. But I tell you what, the cone history graphic, I believe it came out yesterday. That is a great graphic in showing just how good the Hurricane Center is at forecasting these things at this point.
Yeah, no, when you look at this, it looks like it's a big difference, but it's really not. Again, because they're basing this off of model runs that are not as accurate as they're going to be now that we have, of course, the Hurricane Hunter data in there. And you see the actual track history. And this it doesn't show the cone, it shows the actual track. And again, same thing, previous forecast pass, it has that little push to the south, but you can even see this as we get just a little bit further past where we are right now, which of course is right here. This is not a very big spread. It's a slight push to the west, but you know, the good news is it's not that big of a spread. From here, again, that ridge really started here when that ridge was really strong, gave it a little bit more of a push down to the south before it started to make that turn really yesterday to the west-northwest. And that's what we're looking at here. And now you see the forecast. The current forecast is actually overlapping some of the other ones, which is, again, good news, Robert, for the accuracy of this actual track.
Yeah, you know, and that's the key thing, consistency, right? So then we start to talk about, you know, the impacts, because I've a lot of people, of course, are curious, you know, well, how close is it going to get? And the thing I've been saying over and over again is it feels a little bit too close for comfort as far as those impacts are concerned, because we're still going to get those side effects, right? The consistency in the forecast track is great, but then we start to talk about, you know, rip currents. And one issue here that I think we're going to start to look at least for the coast of Florida, is, yeah, right there, the waves, but also that northeasterly fetch. The tides, and this is something I didn't think about till this morning, but we're starting to head towards a new moon. New moon equals spring tide. Now, thankfully, the full new moon is not until next week, I think the 21st to the 22nd, but we are waning, and naturally tides go up at that point, so you're going to be looking at a long onshore flow. And let's loop this ahead. Let's go ahead to Sunday and the Monday here, because then you start to see that, look at that little gradient that's building in out ahead of the storm, and that's a high pressure ridge towards north, the same high that's going to keep this off towards the east, and why we're confident it's not just going to barrel right into Florida here. But that ridge is going to help create that gradient, and I do think we got that long fetch area. So parts of the first coast, including the Jacksonville area, the St. Johns River already has had a lot of rainfall recently, so it's already running a little high. You get that long onshore wind, that could back things up a bit. On top of that, beach erosion, and of course those rip currents. So I've been trying to tell people we don't need a full-on hurricane here to kind of feel those side effects from it, where they might be surprised at those water levels coming up. Now, as far as like damaging winds or anything like that, no, we're not going to see that here. But yeah, there could be those impacts, and that's a really good kind of visual image of what we're looking at here. And I know further towards the north, you know, it's not just us. It's not reserved to Jacksonville, of course, up and down the Carolina coastline, and even over towards, of course, South Carolina there into Columbia. I know you don't have to deal with rip currents there, Daniel, but of course you could be maybe looking at a little bit of rain along coastal areas if this does venture close enough. What are you thinking?
Yeah, if it can skirt a little bit closer, they'll probably get a little bit of some of those extreme outer rain bands towards the coastal region of South Carolina. But you made a good point about the flooding. Charleston floods just in high tides, so any kind of little boost to the tides, not a good thing for the low country, especially in Charleston. There's a look at the European model right now, showing a pretty good setup there with the high pressure in the Atlantic still kind of steering this thing, and you can see maybe just a little bit of rainfall on Wednesday. We also, for us, we're going to have a front kind of approach the area. It looks like late Wednesday and into Thursday. That's probably going to enhance at least the chances for rain for us as this thing kind of skirts on out, and kind of see the rain for us here across South Carolina and even over towards the northern parts of Georgia by Thursday. But we don't need any more rain. It has been extremely wet here in Columbia and the Midlands per se. We've had rain every day this month besides 2. Normally in August, we're kind of hoping for like a weak tropical something, not to cause any damage, but something to increase the moisture and get us out of drought. But we're out of drought in South Carolina, and about 98% of North Carolina out of drought at this point because of all the rain. We need some dry air, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and kind of on the opposite, we've seen our drought here get a little bit worse. It's not too bad here, but what we're seeing again is the just a slight drought here. It's not too bad, but unfortunately we're not going to be seeing really much in terms of rain with this one. As you can see, we do have those winds, and I'm trying to highlight it here for you so you can see it, but what we have is a lot of moisture with this system, but again, going back to that European model, it looks like most of that moisture is going to stay wrapped around the storm and really on the east-northeast side of it. And that is where the heavier rain is going to be. You can see the yellows, you can see the oranges on the eastern side and the northern side. So when it comes to terms of the actual hurricane, it doesn't look like we're going to see much moisture with that. The wind radius is going to be a little bit bigger. Of course, you're going to see breezy conditions, high surf along the outer banks, but it doesn't look like this one. Again, if it was skating up the coast a little bit closer, then we would see more of those impacts of the shower activity. So it looks like, again, with this one making that little jog down to the south, when we talk about these wave heights, now we're talking really Monday, Tuesday into Wednesday, and you can see there around it, we see that 11, 13, even I saw a pop of 16 feet. And so there's your Tuesday, and as you go into Wednesday, you can kind of see how big those waves are getting. And yeah, we're looking at 10, 11 feet there along the coast of the Carolinas. Charleston 7, and like you were mentioning there, Daniel, you see Charleston, a lot of times when you have a king tide, you're going to see flooding from that. And if you're expecting a 7-foot surf on Wednesday afternoon, that's going to be a big issue.
Yeah, if you've ever driven downtown Charleston, and it can be sunny, and you're right, if you have some of these king tides that they periodically have, if you have any kind of rain that really pools there, especially in the downtown area, if you traveled from, we'll say, West Ashley over to Mount Pleasant, it can get quite wet there, and it happens frequently. And any little added pressure to that infrastructure can bring a lot of water into the downtown Charleston area. If you go a little bit further up the coast, up towards Georgetown, Myrtle Beach, even North Myrtle Beach and Cherry Grove, the flooding doesn't occur as much. You got a little different topography up that way. But Charleston, I would have to pay attention to the possibility for some of those flooding, not from the actual tropical system, but just from the water that's getting pushed from the wind action.
Yeah, and you go up to the Outer Banks and you're looking at that 10 to 14 feet as well. So we were talking about people still on vacation. So if you have a trip to the Outer Banks planned, I know that's a lot of the questions I get asked because, of course, you're popular in the beach up there. So you're going to see those there. So we've been showing you this one. This is the tropical steering flow. Talked about that big ridge of high pressure, and it's pretty easy to see right there up to the north of it because it has just been, that's what has been giving it that push. And you see how far that stretches. So again, that's why it's continued on the track. And you can, it might be kind of hard to see, but look at that line. That line is the history line, and then look at the edge of this high pressure. It lines up perfectly to show you why that was pushed down to the south. So again, we still go through, this is another actually from what we had yesterday, a couple of different model runs, and you still see, look at it finding that break. And one of the things we look at is, of course, we would love for this to have already been a major hurricane right now because in nature and physics, it's the stronger system that wins. So if the hurricane becomes a lot stronger than that high pressure, it can pretty much turn whenever it wants to. We talked about sometimes these just do whatever they want. But what it's doing now is, again, now that maybe it's forecasted to be a stronger system, it can push through what you see here. And even this orange is still high pressure. It's not as strong as this or this one over here, but that's where it is finding the break. And Robert, this is the graphic that I saw you using a lot this morning as well.
Yeah, because it's just a good explainer. I like, because we always show the models here, and this given is a model, but I try to remind people that kind of what we're looking at as meteorologists. And that's a good example right there is those high pressures are like mountains. The storm is like water. It's going to try to find the break and find the path of least resistance. So it's a lot more than just looking at that numerical guidance. We're always trying to kind of get an idea of the overall atmospheric dynamics. Now, one thing I do want to hear from you, James, though, because to give Tampa a little bit of love, because you're getting kind of some side effects from this storm, right? By Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, but not in the form of what we're getting on the East Coast. And I think it's the subsidence on the left side of it combined with this area of high pressure. I mean, what are you forecasting for rain out there? Because it should be kind of less by Monday,
Yeah.
Tuesday, and Wednesday because of the subsidence, that outflow aloft pushing down on you. What are you looking at?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, they always say if you've been behind one of these hurricanes, after the hurricanes always brings in the nice weather. Well, we're going to be behind it on Tuesday, and we're looking at some higher rain chances Sunday into Monday. And our higher rain chances that we're looking at is what we consider normal. We're in the rainy season. So we're going to see, again, the chance for those scattered showers and thunderstorms maybe Sunday and Monday. But it really looks like Tuesday into Wednesday, we're going to start to dry out. And yeah, we are looking at drier than normal weather. And with that big ridge, as you can see, building over pretty much central U.S., we're going to be heating up. Of course, we have some heat today. Robert, you know that as well. We have heat advisories out there for the day today, and it looks like we could potentially see that heat again. But our temperature is going to be in the mid-90s, and we're not looking at getting any relief from any of that rain. Again, most of the rain staying right around that core. And then, of course, it's going to be moving out. There's Wednesday. That looks like, maybe we could see a little bit coming back Wednesday into Thursday. But again, we're going to be below normal for our rain with this one. And again, like I mentioned, we need the rain here. So we could definitely use some of that, but it doesn't look like we're going to get it. Now, as we go into the end of the week, you see that high pressure building in back behind it, giving it a little bit of a push. And it looks here like, whoa, this thing is really going to strengthen, but then becoming extra tropical as we go throughout the weekend as it pushes a little further to the north. So we're talking about winds, and that's the thing that we try to, get across to those of you watching from home, and you're thinking, okay, I'm not in the cone, I've got nothing to worry about, but what we're watching is for the potential for some of the wind as well. But it's not really going to be much of an issue here. Robert, you were talking about Puerto Rico. We're also looking at Turks and Caicos, looking at the Bahamas, and you can see there the forecasted winds. You can see, again, this is the potential for tropical storm force winds. And you can see the Virgin Islands right there in the yellow. That's about a 40 to 50% potential to get tropical storm force winds. Puerto Rico as well, which they'll be getting a little bit of the rain from it too. But they're getting winds. They're going to get the waves. They're going to have the erosion. But again, the good news is the core of the wind is going to stay offshore. Same thing, pushing their way up Turks and Caicos through the Bahamas as well. And you can see already in the picture there, you see a bunch of zeros for Florida, which we always like to see those zeros. And same thing up through the Carolinas. You have a very small potential, if this shifts a little bit, to possibly see some of those tropical storm force winds maybe right there just for the Outer Banks. But again, not really looking at too much of an issue for that. And guys, we'll go back to this one. This is, again, the model comparison. And again, it's just really looking like the same. It still looks like, again, pretty good consensus all the way up through Sunday. It does start to split a little bit with, again, like we were talking about, Robert, Daniel, the European model still pushing a little bit closer to the coast. So again, for Daniel, this might be a little bit bigger of an issue for the Carolinas than it would be for the rest of us. But when you talk about a bigger issue, it's not really that big of an issue, right?
No, and we'll say big issue as in we're going to have some strong rip currents. And we talked about this earlier in the week. The weather's going to be pretty nice. So you got a storm way out to sea. You got sunny conditions along the coast, and you go out to the beach, and then you've got these life-threatening rip currents. You have this beach erosion, and you have these bigger than normal wave heights. So, for us, it is going to be an indirect impact along the coastal region, but, it always could be worse. I will say I was just looking at what we here in Columbia call our in-house forecast model, and the storm is just getting picked up on the cusp of our data that comes in every so often, and it actually keeps the storm a little bit farther towards the east and north. So there's just a lot of things to look at, but the current trends, I think we were all pretty satisfied with right now. It always could be a lot worse.
Yeah, absolutely. We're pretty satisfied with the way the forecast model is headed. Before we go, let's really quick look at this next one because we have another invest. This one they've given some potential for some development. It looks like, again, this is right on the coast. So this is really nothing much to worry about here. I just wanted to hit on it because it's out there and people are seeing it. But, you watch what happens as we go throughout the rest of the day today. It's already on shore. Let's go back. Robert, one thing we were talking about yesterday is your trivia question. Did you get any responses on social media for that trivia question about the hurricane that hit?
I at least didn't see any, but for anybody that was watching yesterday and today, I know both of you know this one. It was Charlie back in 2004. Actually, there was another one, if you want another trivia question. It was on this day in 1969, we had a big hurricane in the Gulf that was about to make landfall. Maybe we could hold that off until Monday, the answer for that one. I'll give you a hint. It starts with a C.
Okay.
So my point is, it's that time of year. But yeah, Charlie was the answer to that. If anybody was curious about that, I'm sure y'all remember that. Daniel, were you were working definitely during that storm? You remember that one?
I thought you were talking about the sea storm in 1969. That was a little bit before my time, but I was
not that
around
one.
in 2004. I don't remember what I was doing.
You're talking about too. I wasn't even born yet, so yeah. All right. Well, I appreciate you guys, and we're going to continue to track this over the weekend. And again, we're all three watching. All of us are watching for it to make that turn as we go throughout the weekend. So we're going to be here for the first part of next week as well, still covering this, still talking about this. And when we're here on Monday at 11. It's more than likely still going to be a Category 4 storm, a monster storm. So luckily, again, the good news is forecast models are agreeing this one's going to stay offshore. We'll keep you updated if there's any changes over the weekend, and we'll all be back here, so be sure to tune in.